今日は日本語を勉強してる人に向いてるような動画を投稿したいんだけど、まあほとんど英語でビデオを撮るけど、紹介ぐらいは日本語でしたくて、こんな感じになってます。動画の話題は日本語の学習者に勉強になる本だけど、なんか本当によくある本じゃなくて、本屋さんでよく手に入れないような本を紹介したいと思います。本屋さんでは手に入れないかもしれないけど、もしオンラインなんか Amazon とかで探したらきっとすぐ見つかると思いますから、楽しみに見てください。Okay, so the first book I want to talk about is called Common Japanese Collocations, and collocations is basically a fancy word for frequent words that are paired together. And it's written by Kakuko Shoji, or at least edited and compiled by that individual. And its basic format is a phrase book, but usually when people think of a phrase book, they think of kind of one of those flashy like travel guides where it's like, I'm trying to find the restroom, or where's the Shinkansen? And then they have like a corny section about romance and like a corny section about what if you get lost, and like it's really not super useful for people past the survival level. But this is actually an intermediate to advanced phrase book, and has it's basically set up by category and then subcategory. So the categories are things like home, daily life, people, school and work, travel, entertainment, which sounds pretty normal for a phrase book, but then each of those categories is broken down further. So for example, under daily life, it's broken down to the weather, post office, bank, shopping, restaurants, cars and commuting, hospital and pharmacist, etc., etc., hair and beauty, troubles and dangers, payment and paperwork. And that's just one section in its subsections. If you go into people, looks, traits, personality, feelings, thoughts, and behavior. If you go into entertainment, it says dining out, romance, karaoke, karaoke. Sorry, American pronunciation. Movies and concerts, museums, sports and outdoor activities, parties, fashion, other hobbies and interests. It really gets really in depth in each simple section, breaks it down into the more complex. So when you go into a section, for example, I'm going to go into student life. And so if you look at this page, it has vocabulary words in the margin, and then, you know, if you go past the margin, it has different phrases, and then underneath the phrases are example sentences. So it breaks down into 3 tiers. For example, there's an entry on this page called Student Life that says the vocabulary word kosoku, which means school rules. And under kosoku, you have some shorter phrases that are broken down, so like kosoku o mamoru, kosoku ni ihan suru, kosoku o kaeru, and stuff like that. And then under those phrases, you have yet again more delineation, where you then have an entire example sentence. So for example, under kosoku ni ihan suru, which means to break school rules, you have the example sentence, kaminoke o someru no wa kosoku ni ihan shiteiru. Dyeing your hair is against school rules. So not only did you learn the word kosoku, but then you can learn phrases with kosoku, and then you can take those shorter phrases and put them into sentences. So it's this like dissemination of 3 steps that's really helpful. And it's multiple kind of things like that on each page. So like if I flip to thoughts and behavior, they say the word like kuchi, mouth. And then they say all these different phrases or idioms that have the word mouth. Kuchi ni suru, to mention something. Kuchi o hasamu, to interrupt somebody. And it just goes on and on. So this is a personal favorite of mine. I've actually had it for about 3 years, and no matter how long you have it, you're not going to stop learning things in it. I secretly harbor the belief that if I were to exhaust this entire book's worth of vocab, I would pretty much be fluent. I mean, I know that's an exaggeration, but there's a lot of good stuff in here, and it goes beyond beginner intermediate. It really gets into kind of everyday phrases, and the examples are good, and as you can see, I've kind of littered mine with post-it notes and notes in the margins. So this is my number 1 recommendation in this video, is Kakuko Shoji's Common Japanese Collocations. The second book that I want to review is called Love, Hate, and Everything in Between by Mamiko Murakami, and this sounds like a soap opera title, but it's actually another phrase book, kind of like the one previous where it's a more intermediate to advanced level phrase book. but I think that anybody of any level can pick up things from it. It has both kanji and kana and romaji inside, so basically anybody can read it, and it has like English translations for everything. Once again, it's broken down into categories and then smaller categories. So this one, the first half of the book deals with positive emotions related to love, and then the second half of the book deals with negative emotions. So you have categories such as like friendly love, romantic love, uncertainty, gratitude, annoyance, disappointment, anger, joy, surprise, that kind of thing. And under each of those little subcategories, you have a whole bunch of individual words and example sentences. So if we're going to open to one of the really fun sections from the negative emotions side, the section I randomly opened to was arrogance and pride. So it has words like tengu ni naru, ibaru, takabisha, funzori kaeru, hana ni kakeru. Just all of these great phrases to talk about people being stuck up. If you turn to another more positive category, there's a category talking about friends, and you have vocabulary like nakayoshi, osana najimi, nakanaori suru, ki ga au, that kind of thing. So basically every single kind of emotional category you can think of, you have a lot of phrases. And, sorry, that was loud. The reason that I like this book so much is that she talks about in the intro how a lot of foreign students of Japanese language tend to think that the language is katakurushi, which basically means like stiff and awkward and formal and hard to express what you want to say. But even though it might have some formalities or like degrees of politeness that we don't use in English, where you might be more reserved speaking Japanese, that doesn't mean that there's not a wide scope of words that you can use to express your emotions. In fact, there's a whole ton in here that I think can't be well translated into English. I actually prefer to talk about feelings in Japanese. I think it's more clear. But you're not going to get that impression as a beginner. So this is really good for people who want to be able to better understand nuance in vocabulary. And again, it has example sentences. I really like this because of the shortness of the individual sections. I can kind of track my progress by saying, okay, in the next week I'm going to learn this section and like check that off. And you don't have to do it like that. You don't have to make it a regimen, but that's what I've personally done. You can really just flip through it and discover stuff as you go. Really recommend this one too. It's Love, Hate, and Everything in Between, Expressing Emotions in Japanese by Murakami Mamiko. Okay, Sansatsume. The third book that I want to review is not exactly a phrase book. It's more of it's really written like mini essays, but it's about the more, it's called Making Sense of Japanese, What the Textbooks Don't Tell You, which is such a clickbait title, but it's so good. It's really true. It's by Jay Rubin, who's, I think, a very acclaimed interpreter of Japanese. And this book goes into really weird grammar stuff that people get hung up on for years. So stuff like wa versus ga, which you think you explained really simply like in your third year of study, or maybe your first year of study, but the more you like hear examples, the more you're like, why is that one and not that one? Like, particle confusion is gone over so intensely in this book. So are things like transitive versus intransitive verbs in usages that are like confusing or surprising. So are omitted subjects and kind of like going into more hard example sentences with omitted subjects. The difference between shiru and wakaru, the differences between kimeru and kimaru, and like when you use what. And it sounds pretty simple, like, oh, one's transitive, one's intransitive, but I read the chapter and I was like, whoa, because they went into so much, just so much nuance. They have things about kind of difficult particles like tame, hodo, that, you know, have their initial easy uses, but they get way more complicated when you get into certain examples. It talks about de aru in depth. It talks about all of the different ways to talk about being and how that stuff is translated. It talks about... there's just a lot that I can't even explain looking at the chapter names. I'm just like, what was that again? But just basically things that you thought were wibbly-wobbly up in the air, you have to magically understand some magical weirdness, but actually he actually explains how it works. I think this is a must-read for any student studying for N3, N2, or N1. Not because it's like standardized test prep, but because if you're at that level, you would really benefit from understanding this kind of stuff about grammar. So 最後に, lastly, is a dictionary of Japanese particles, and because it's Kodansha, you automatically know that it's going to be a really good and thorough resource. But the reason I like this in particular is because, one, it's set up really nicely. It has every single particle you could think of, like more than 24 different grammatical particles and functions sorted into a nice chart, and then a nice table of contents. So if you're a chart person, you're set. If you're a table of contents person, you're set. Everybody's happy. And then it also just really breaks down functions. Instead of just saying, oh, here's one main function, now here's some examples that are slightly different. It breaks it down into like it'll take one particle and it'll be like, there are 6 coherent uses of this. And it'll talk about how it changes when different suffixes are added. It'll talk about complexity. It just gets really into it. So like, it won't just talk about to and then wa separately. It'll talk about toyu koto wa as a whole, like, conglomerate grammar. It'll talk about tokoro ga. It'll talk about toshite, toshite mo, toshite wa. Like, all of these different grammars. Zutsu, yori. I'm looking at straight up 3 double-sided pages of tables of contents of just particles. And each of those particles has a, like, segmented section of different functions of each particle. So this is just really cohesive. It has example sentences again in Romaji, Kana, and Kanji, and with the English translations. And I just got this 3 days ago, and I'm already religiously writing things down in my notebooks. It's just really good. Thumbs up. That's all the books that I wanted to review. I truly do think you can probably find all of them on Amazon or eBay or similar. If you are having trouble finding them, please just let me know, and I'll try and wrangle up some from Google and send you links. Otherwise, I found 1 or 2 just in my used bookstore, so always go to your local used bookstore and check out the language section, because sometimes you find something really obscure that is not mainstream published anymore. These are all still published and out there, but I have found other things that aren't. とにかくこれで以上になります。動画を見てくれてありがとうございました。もし質問とかコメントがあったら、下でコメントを書いてください。ありがとうございます。